Hello and welcome to Pet Talk from me and a very chatty Teddy today. And we would like to introduce, well, I think I better say my name, hadn't I? I'm Anna Isabel. This, as you may have gathered, is, can you say your name again? Teddy. And our guest today is Kate Thornton. And welcome, Kate.
Hello, thanks for having me.
I watched you in another interview, and I was so impressed with your work that I thought it would be lovely to have you on Pet Talk, because you are an equine sports remedial massage person.
I am. Yes.
Just thinking, what would be the adjective to follow that?
Person is good. I'll go with that. Yeah.
Practitioner person. You're based in Norfolk and you do beautiful work. So maybe a good place to start would be what does it mean to be an equine sports remedial massage practitioner?
Okay. So basically I hesitate to say job because it does never feel like a job to me, which I'm very lucky to say. But my job is to help to support horses and ponies and their humans in terms of their musculoskeletal health. So that could be anything, and it could be a young horse that's just developing, or it could be a sports horse, it could be a retired horse that's just not ridden, any across the board. And so my work includes massage and kinesiotaping and craniosacral therapy, depending on what the individual horse needs at that time. So I would go in and assess them by watching them move, and having a very good look at them from all angles, and kind of from the foot upwards, it's the whole thing. Talk to the owner about their history. I've not seen them before. Their history, the work they did before, the work they're doing now, if anything, and just kind of get an entire picture of where the horse is at, because whilst my work is mainly soft tissue work, I need to consider everything. So where the horse is at with their dental checks, with their tack checks, with their foot trim cycle, just the whole package really. And a big part of that is where they're at emotionally, their emotional well-being, because that has bearing on their physical health and vice versa. And it's all a big interconnected picture. So it's very involved. And but it's a very rewarding job, because most of my customers are regular, so they'll have me at regular intervals, and you really get to build a relationship with the horse and the human, and be a part of their journey. So yeah, that's an overview.
There's so much in everything you've just said. But I think maybe I'd like to back up a little bit and explain sacrocranial therapy.
Okay, yeah, sure. So it's one that I find quite difficult to explain in words. It's very much about feel. So it's from the field of osteopathy. And this was a kind of adjunct training that I did. So it was an extra training course that I did after I qualified. I actually did it in April, we're gone. So it's basically the practice of assessing the spinal column and the spinal canal, because we all have spinal fluid, right? So it's flowing backwards and forwards through the spinal canal from the cranium to the sacrum, and that's kind of like a central hub of balance, if you like. So all the messages that go out to the body stem from there. So to keep that in good balance, craniosacral therapy aims to assess the feel of that and the surrounding tissue and all the layers from that place upward to the skin, really. It's so hard to explain, and it was a very interesting training because when I went into it, I thought, I'm not really sure. I don't really understand how this will work, and I probably won't be able to feel it. And so it was very much like that. And we were all in a classroom with balloons to start with, and just feeling the energy. So it's a lot about energy, and that sounds a bit woo-woo perhaps, but it's actually physics. We're surrounded by energy and molecules, and they're all kind of pulsating the whole time. So to actually be able to feel that, and it takes a lot of focus. And then when you feel something, and I could feel something on the balloon that's very different to what you might feel on the balloon. You might feel it shift this way, you might feel it buzzing. So it's a very personal kind of perception. Then working with intention of actually rebalancing that energy and bringing it to a central point. And then we practiced on each other. And then we did a lot of practice on horses, the place where we were training. And I'm still practicing. It's something that takes a hell of a lot of practice. And, doing it at home, doing it, just practicing the focus and the feel. And yeah, it's a difficult one to explain. And I haven't done a very good job there. But you find it's used often in human osteopathic treatments, and I've had it myself, and it can be a very, very strange feeling actually, to feel things shift in your body. So yeah, it's one that I'm building on, I would say, to be fair.
Well, I was immediately struck by it because obviously I've heard of it being practiced on people. I hadn't come across someone doing it with horses, and I just thought that was so exciting to hear that is happening. The other thing you said that also really stood out for me was you talked about the emotional well-being of the horse and the impact that it might also be having on it physically. So tell us about maybe go from what a happy horse looks like emotionally. What is it how do we know a horse is happy versus how we know a dog, a horse is unhappy?
I guess, that slight slip of the tongue there. It's actually probably very similar. But I guess it's a subjective thing as well, isn't it? So it's quite difficult to say, and perhaps if you know a horse better, you might kind of understand where they're at a particular time. But there are certain markers that we can look for. And in terms of a horse that's not happy, there's a whole array of communication signs that we can assess. So facial tension, their ears are very communicative. So if you have a horse with pin back ears when you approach, that's not a happy horse about you approaching. Muscular tension, you can see bracing, as you can with people, bracing body language, how they interact with each other if they're with other horses, how they interact with their owner, can be quite telling. Again, if the owner approaches and you see some kind of recoil response, it can just make you think, well, okay, there's something not quite right there. They're not quite sure about that. But of course, it might not be that current owner that is the problem. It could be a historic conditioned emotional response to approach. But actually, there's been quite a lot of work on assessing whether a horse is in pain from some of the signs that they give us. So pain being, I'm jumping to pain here, but pain can be quite a big source of an unhappy horse. But a wonderful veterinary surgeon and scientist, I'm going to say Sue Dyson, worked with a group of people and came up with a set of 24 behaviors that we can observe in the ridden horse. And so it's the ridden horse in pain ethogram. And she's done, they've done a video which you can find yourself. I can give you the video, the website link during this. But it breaks it down into different areas of the body and different behaviors and different signs that you might see, and then the combinations that might go together, and how long would the horse be displaying that sign before you would think, hang on a minute, there's probably a pain going on here somewhere. The other thing is there's the equine grimace scale, which shows lots and lots of different pictures of the horse's face and different the nostril tension or not, tension through the cheeks and the jowls, the eyes, the ears, the throat, everything. So there's quite a lot of resource out there now for determining from behavioral signals and communication signals whether a horse is in pain. The other kind of again, it goes back to looking at the whole picture. What is the horse's environment? What's their routine? Have they got friends? Do they have access to forage? Do they have freedom? Do they have turnout, or are they in a box all day? So just looking at the whole kind of big picture, and watching their body language. Are they happy to approach? Are they kind of looking depressed and shut down and not wanting to communicate with anybody? So there's quite an array, but as I say, it's kind of subjective, as it is with everybody.
Yes, of course. And yet, there are things there that for those of us who don't have many dealings with horses would recognize in our dogs, those of us who have dogs. And I dare say even with cats. So although these are different, there are differences between the species, including our own, there are certain similarities. We're warm-blooded creatures, and we have a central nervous system, and I think there are some very strong similarities here. So I'm just thinking about now, you started to talk about pain and grimacing, and dogs are notoriously stoic. It's not. It takes a lot for us to be able to determine that a dog is in pain. In many cases, are horses the same? Do they mask pain?
Yeah, I mean, as a prey animal, they instinctively don't want to look weakened. So absolutely, they do. I think it's quite an innate response for them to do that, which is why sometimes it's quite subtle. You might not realize that your horse is actually living in pain. I think you get horses that are more see, I don't want to say stoic, because I don't know if it's necessarily a conscious decision to look brave and hide it in that way. But you get some that will show their pain quicker, let's say. And I think, like us, I would say they've all got different pain thresholds. So you might get somebody who just kind of cracks on with a headache, and somebody who says, oh, I've got a migraine, and it's really hurting them more than the other person. And yeah, so I think it does vary. But certainly I think they do hide it, which is why we need to look a little bit closer. And like you say, with dogs, you can from their body language, calming signals, they exist in horses as well. So there's a lot of crossover for sure.
So if a horse is displaying calming signals, actually, maybe it's good to talk about what calming signals look like in a horse.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest expert on this. So I would point you to a fabulous lady called Rachel Drosma, who runs Calming Signals and Horses. She's got a couple of books out, which they are very good references with pictures and kind of contextual explanations. But you get similar things too in dogs: the narrowing of the eye, the turning of the face, the kind of movement of the ears further back than kind of the normal pointed forward. Not necessarily pinned, but you might get pinned if they're really warning. Moving away, turning the side of the body. Some would say that yawning is a calming signal, but again, I think that's quite contextual, because I think there can be lots of different settings which might cause a horse to yawn, possibly the same as dogs.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Essentially, what you're describing is actually common sense. If a horse doesn't want to engage for whatever reason, it's giving you the signal that they don't want to engage. They're looking away from you. They're backing away. And you see dogs doing exactly the same thing, and cats as well, you know. It's basically saying to you, for whatever reason, I really don't, you're too close to me. This is too intense. I'm not happy about this. And so please back off. So in fact, I find them to be unfailingly polite in their attempts.
Yes.
They
are. Yeah.
They really are. They are unfailingly polite in saying, please, back off. So dogs, if they're feeling like you're not listening, they'll give you a growl. A cat might give you a bit of a swipe. And hopefully people will pay attention at that point. How do horses say, hey, you're not listening, back off?
Yeah, good question. This is perhaps where there's not so much crossover. I guess just they may swing round to nip you, or to as if they're going to nip you, like the head may swing round. You might see a back leg raising up, which horses can either cow kick, so they kick outwards with their back leg, or they can kick backwards. So they've got quite a range of motion there in which to clip you with the hoof. And yeah, that's a definite kind of well, this is get away now because I've had enough. But like you say, they're very, very patient with it, and there's quite an escalation before they resort to that if they're not listened to, with tail swishing and again ear pinning and tightened nostrils and moving away. And I think displacement behaviors are actually something that are possibly labeled as fidgety, naughty, mischievous, like lead rope biting or pawing the floor or sniffing the ground. So again, there are some crossovers with dogs there, I think, but yeah, quite a repertoire.
So the displacement behaviors you're talking about, that's basically there's signals of discomfort and stress, really. So I guess I was asking the question because I would imagine that these could be signals that a horse is not happy, or as in physically comfortable. That a horse is physically uncomfortable and possibly pain if they are displaying these types of behaviors.
Yeah, 100%. And it's something that I'm quite passionate about in the work that I do, because their responses tell me a lot about the parts of their body that I'm approaching, because I need to know if they've got pain or discomfort there. It tells me a lot about what may need to be worked on. And there are people who, with their best intentions, feel that the horse should stand still for me. So as they move around and start telling me, actually, no, that's uncomfortable, or they go to nip, or anything, basically, if they're giving me signals, moving away, shifting around, sniffing the floor, all of the above, they may be told to stand up, stand still, stop, stop being a pain, all of these things. And I kind of have to say, no, actually, do you know what? I really appreciate what I'm watching here because it's painting a picture for me, which is why in an ideal world, I like to work with them unheld and untied, because then they're free to tell me, um, where they're at.
That's so huge, isn't it? Because it's about communication, and people are really good at shutting down communication. Uh,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's inadvertent. Um, there's one instance where I accidentally did it with Teddy. Um, he always gives me my slippers when we get home, and I don't ask him. This just kind of is a thing that evolved between us. But he goes and he gives me my slippers, and then he puts my shoes away. And
Wow.
every so often, um, he gets distracted. So this is why I didn't spot that there was a problem. But I I thought he was a little bit distracted, and I said to him, "Teddy, where are mummy's slippers?" Thinking, what's up, you know?
Yeah.
And he didn't move, and I think that should have been a signal to me that all was not well. But he'd been running
Hmm.
around on a walk. He'd been absolutely fine. We got home, and so I said to him again, "Teddy, what's up? Where's mummy's slippers?" And bless him, he went to pick up one of the slippers, and as he did so, he just threw up all over the floor.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
you see, I didn't have a lot to go on there,
Mm.
but at the same time, I was trying to understand why his behavior was different, and I didn't have a lot because
Mm.
he was just standing there. And it is not uncommon for him to get distracted. He does get distracted sometimes. And I wasn't being forceful or anything. I was just actually going, well, what's going on here? What's up? Um,
Yeah.
and there he was. Now, thankfully, I hadn't been pushing, or, I was just doing the normal kind of chit chat. Oh, what happened to my slippers kind of thing? Because
Yeah.
otherwise I would have felt absolutely dreadful. But there it was, a real example of sometimes how spotting something different in the behavior can actually be telling us something. uh,
Hmm.
and we really need to be sensitive to that, I think.
Mm. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think probably we've all got times when we have been guilty of not listening. But yeah, I think changes in behavior, especially if you know the animal, and you notice that this is not what they would normally do in this situation, or particularly with when horses are ridden, if they tend to, I don't like the word, but I'm going to just say, for want of a better word, if they perform in a certain way, um, and then suddenly they don't, uh, it's uh, it's really important, I think, that we listen to that because I don't tend to believe that they have this intention to annoy us and just play us up and just be a pain in the butt or I don't know whatever else labels gets used, which they do sadly. And often in some scenarios, it might mean an amplification of the question that we're asking. So sadly, that can mean whipping or kicking or shouting or any of these things to try to change the behavioral output or the work that the horse is doing. Yeah. But I think particularly if you know a horse and suddenly something changes or something changes over time, it's, as you say, it's an indicator that something's out of balance, something.
It is extremely painful to consider that whipping is still happening, and I just can't bear the thought of it. Um, you were talking about how you're reading the horse based on where it basically doesn't want you to go and touch him, because that's clearly where the problem is. So how do you address that? What do you do? Do you have an indirect way of working with the horse to get the horse to relax so that you're able to get to where you need to go eventually?
Yeah, and that varies with every horse. Sometimes you, say for example, the shoulder area was clearly an area where it wasn't uh, a good place to be touching. Um, it could be that that horse particularly likes to be scratched over the hindquarters or something. That's just their sweet spot. So this is where you talk to their human and say, where does he really like? Where does she really like? And go for the scratch to try and get some initial relaxation and take the pressure off, and kind of say, okay, I'm not going to pressure you. Let's do something nice instead. Or the other thing is that because everything in their bodies, in our bodies, in dogs, cats, every mammal is interconnected by a web of fascia. Um, if the shoulder hurts, it might not actually be the shoulder that's got the primary cause of pain. So it could be elsewhere. So just kind of continuing to feel and see whether you get any other responses, either from the horse or from the tissue that you're feeling. But it can be that if the again, if the shoulder, for example, is where the horse is reactive, then you can follow what's called myofascial chains, which you've probably heard of, and there are many of them. But chains of fascia within the body, that you can actually influence the rest of that chain by working from a distant point. So you can start to influence the tissue that you're trying to get to, but from a distance. And yeah, that's another way. But relaxation is always a good one. But if there's a pain there, then the likelihood is that you're going to have to influence the tissue surrounding or distant from that place.
Can you clarify for those who are not familiar with fascia what it actually is?
Yeah, sure. So fascia is the biggest sensory organ in the body. So it's absolutely teeming with receptor cells. So it is like best way to describe it. It's kind of like a web, but it's multi-directional tissue. It's like a stretchy. I'm not describing this very well. It surrounds everything in the body: organs, bones, muscles, tendons, ligaments, everything. It surrounds everything. And there's lots of different layers of fascia within the body. It helps to deliver nutrients, to rid the body of toxins. It supports the lymphatic system. It helps encourage blood flow and hydration and oxygen. And so it's a multifunctional structure, but it is absolutely essential to life. And it does mean that the body is influenced by different points of the body are influenced by other points, and everything is interconnected. So we're kind of I don't know if you've heard of biotensegrity, but perhaps we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole here. But basically it's a kind of how to explain it. Well, yeah, I've said it. If something is influencing one part of the body, it impacts another part of the body. So everything is connected. One good example is if you had a heavy rucksack on one shoulder, you can feel, if you imagine that now, you can feel that it affects the other side of your body, and it affects the way your other shoulder goes, and actually your other hip, and that affects the way your leg is positioned. And so everything is kind of interconnected. So yeah, but fascia, one of its jobs is to tell or help tell the brain that there's pain. So from that perspective as well, it's an important thing. But it can get restricted and it can get dry and it can get adhered to other tissues, and then its function is impaired.
That's wonderful, a wonderful clarification for everyone. Thank you. Because now it becomes more clear why we have this issue of, transferred pain and how you are able then to help without going exactly where the horse doesn't want you to go by working on something else. That's very clear and it's wonderful. So, what can get horses into trouble in terms of the musculoskeletal structure? You've already talked about distress, emotional stress, but is there something about the fact that people ride them? Is it something about perhaps an accident, when they're trotting along? What can get them into trouble?
That's a good question because I think the causes are so many, so many. But I think we have to start from the early days, really, because one of the most common causes for musculoskeletal issues in horses is the way they're raised from being foal, and their diet at that time, and how they're allowed to develop or not, how they're worked, how early they're worked, what type of work, the frequency, the terrains that they're worked on, all have an impact on the body. And whilst it is important for the process of bone remodeling and growth and development for weight bearing and impact through kind of concussive forces through the limb, that is important. If we do too much too soon, that can have detrimental effects, which is one of the reasons that we see this in so many sports horses. Race horses started particularly young, and later often have chronic problems as a result, but it's not the only sport with issue. It's and even leisure horses are often backed so that people start riding them basically younger than they should be ridden. And a big male horse can take up to 8 years to actually fully develop. So 8 years old. I mean, that is like maybe a 1700 horse, but even so, you're looking at 6 to 8 years for the growth plates to completely close. And the spine is the last place to do that. And that's exactly what we sit on when we ride. So that's one common cause of musculoskeletal issue.
Huge, because we know with dogs we're told that they shouldn't run too much in the first year, or that for instance things like agility, we shouldn't be doing any high impact sports, anything with them in the first year, because they need that time for their bodies to mature, and horses take longer, which of course means people are more impatient and less likely to wait. And yet, wow, that's a big thing, isn't it?
It's so big, and I find it a crying shame because I don't know. I guess there's an element of competition and wanting to compete. There's money, especially when you're talking racehorses. There's money, and one of the things that I can't get my head around it, but it has been the case for centuries, I guess, is that horses are bought and sold throughout their lives. Not all horses, but many horses. So when they're no good for the current purpose, they are sold on and often retrained into a different discipline. There's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but the point is that in some scenarios, they're kind of more commodities than they are a part of our family, a friend, another being, actually. So yeah, it's a really big thing, because I think then the kind of viewpoint of, if I take my time now and let this process happen to the best ability that it can, the time it takes to actually do, and mental development as well, so not just physical, then I would have a healthier, happier horse for longer. But because they are sold on, it takes that thought process, that motivation perhaps away. Like with our dogs and our cats, I think that's slightly different. We have a dog and we intend from the first day that we will have that dog until their dying day, and we will look after them and do what we need to do for them mentally and physically. Not in all cases, but generally that's, but it's not always the case with horses. That said, I am meeting more and more people in my work, and I guess my clients, that they ask me out because they have the well-being of the horse at heart, and in the first place, but who have their horses and they have them for life. And if it means I can't ride that horse anymore because of X, Y, Z, that's fine. But he'll still be with me till the end, and that's heartening. But there's still a lot of fields where that's not the case, sadly.
I'm just thinking about the fact that they are herd animals, and that means that they have a natural inclination towards strong attachments. And I can't even begin to get my head around the fact that they don't get the chance to develop that if they're being sold on frequently. And I can imagine the psychological impact that would have on them. It must be quite tough, really.
I would say it's incredibly tough, and I think this is another way where we were talking earlier about how they are very patient with us with their calming signals and their signs before they react. And I think as well, they kind of I don't know, they just tolerate things so well. But inside, how must that feel? I think your question is so poignant, because as you say, the chance to develop relationships in the ones that have developed a relationship and a bond, suddenly that other horse is not a part of their life. Are they with other horses in their new home, or are they going to a place where there's no other horses? Are they going to gel with that herd that they go to? But where is their friend that they've been with for the last 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, whatever it might be? Which is, I'm going to say, that is a form of grief. And so how many times do they go through that kind of grieving process? And on top of that, grief when they lose a herd member through death as well, which a good friend and colleague of mine, Irene Perrett, is doing a lot of work on grief in horses. Yeah, she's really delving into it because it's so real.
It would be. They are, herd animals are in their, by nature very sensitive, and horses are reputedly extremely sensitive. So it has to, you can't ignore that, however inconvenient it might be for many people. It is a fact that they are going to be very sensitive. So coming back to the physical side of things, we know that then one of the causes for musculoskeletal issues would be behaviors that are imposed on them, or things that are imposed on them before their bodies have fully developed. But is there, if I had a horse in my life, what could I do to help it walk in, with human beings? If we walk in with a certain posture, obviously that's better for our backs. Is there something that people can do to help their horses walk in the best way for themselves?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think one of the biggest things in that respect is they need to look at the whole body. And one of the most important areas of the body to look at is the feet, because so many problems can stem from the feet. And hoof morphology and what that does then to the rest of the limb, and therefore the pelvis and the shoulder and the neck and so forth. It's all interconnected. So hoof shape, hoof health, and their relationship to the rest of the body, and conformation comes into that. Horses vary so much through conformation. So having a hoof care professional who will work with you on that, and one who will explain what they're doing and why, is a good place to start. But as well as that, the other things that I mentioned earlier, so dental examinations, regular dental checks, because if there are issues there, that then can affect the whole kind of balance of the cranium. Tension around the mouth can affect the jaw, the whole kind of under chain of the horse, which then goes over the top line of the horse as well. So that's going to affect posture. So yeah, dental. Tack. Are they wearing the right tack? Does it fit? Is there any impingement there? Is it appropriate? There's a lot of kind of buying of tack off eBay and plopping it on your horse and off you go. But that said, again, happily, there are a lot of people who have very regular tack checks and things like seasonal changes, weight changes, even dental changes can mean that you need to check your tack again. But you're talking about posture, and I think that if you can help a horse, if everything else, if you've looked at the whole picture and now you're trying to help your horse's musculoskeletal system operate in the best way it can, looking at the core muscles and the kind of sling muscles of the skeletal system, and making sure that they are A, not restricted, and B, able to engage and work effectively to help lift the back and relax the neck, and move in a much more healthy, free motion with as much range of motion through the body as possible. But all of this, as it's taking me a long time to say it, it also takes a long time to work through. It's not an overnight kind of thing. But there is a lot that people can do.
Well, it's not an overnight thing. It's something that people need to take the time to work through. But luckily, horses have a lot of time. So we can take that time to engage with them and pay attention. Excuse me, as is the case with all of our animals, we need to be observant and pay attention and look out for those small signs that all is not well. But your presence here today has given, I'm sure, everyone some really good tips and things to look out for, and plenty of food for thought about horses and what they need. So, Kate, I thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Anna. It's been great talking to you.
And if people want to find you, how do they do that?
Mhm. Um, so I'm on Facebook, as we mostly are these days, which you will, I think it's just Kate Thornton Equine at Kate Thornton Equine. I can also be found through the International Equine Professionals website, iepglobal.net. Um, And IEP, by the way, is a fabulous resource for anybody looking for further information across the board because we're a multidisciplinary organisation. So our members are not just body workers. There's behaviourists and podiatrists and gut experts and everything across the board. So it's a good mixture, and we're all very, very ethical. That's what's at the heart of the organisation. My website is equinemassagenorfolk.co.uk. Yeah, so
Wonderful.
those would be the main places.
I will be putting the link in the description box. Kate, thank
Oh,
you
okay.
for your time.
Thank you. A pleasure. Thank you for having me, Anna.
And thank you all for watching. In the coming weeks, we will be talking about cockapoos, bull breeds, cats, and more about horses. Until next time, goodbye.